30, 50 years, we're going to be looking back on today, and we're really going to be thinking that it was just insane that we're cutting down the Amazon rainforest to make space for cattle so that we can have burgers.
Our appetite for beef is driving global deforestation. In the Amazon alone, thousands of hectares are felled or burnt each year to create grazing land for cattle. And according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, about 1.5 billion cattle are producing 7 gigatons of greenhouse gases per year. That's 60% livestock emissions, and 40% of that is in the form of methane, which is 25 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. But convincing a meat eater to switch to plant-based foods is a tough sell. However, US scientists may have found a taste-driven solution.
I'm here in the city of San Leandro in Northern California, where scientists are attempting to grow beef in the laboratory that tastes just as good as conventional beef. One big hurdle is that it's an astronomically expensive process, but here at the startup facility Gate 510, Sci-Fi Foods is looking to use their technology to dramatically reduce the cost.
The process of creating cultivated beef to add to plant-based foods begins when cells are extracted directly from cattle like these. That genetic material then makes its way to Sci-Fi Foods headquarters. Dr. Cassie Agora is the co-founder, and today she's also our tour guide.
And this is?
So this is our cryo storage. So our associate here is retrieving some of our stored samples. So we store our engineered cell lines in liquid nitrogen, keeps them nice and cold, and this is a really great stopping point. So it allows us to save our work and retrieve cell lines when we're ready to test their behavior. So that vial will contain millions of individual beef cells in a cryopreservation medium.
To increase the efficiency, many of the systems here are automated, including this liquid handling robot.
So instead of sitting there with a multi-channel pipette, doing them all one by one, this can do 96 at a time. Basically, it allows our team to more efficiently do all their R&D protocols without doing it by hand, but using the automation as a tool to do more.
It frees up you scientists, right?
That's right. It frees up the technical team to think deep thoughts and solve technical problems.
Technical problems like modifying DNA.
Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is found in all organisms. It's made up of 4 chemical bases known as nucleotides. They're adenine, A, guanine, G, cytosine, C, and thymine, T. DNA bases pair up with each other. A goes with T and C goes with G, forming what are known as base pairs. There are 3 billion base pairs arranged along 2 spiraling strands known as a double helix, sequences from a few hundred to 2 million formed genes. Animals like humans and cattle have around 20 to 25,000 genes, which encode all of the proteins that create the characteristics that make up that particular animal.
Sci-Fi Foods is utilizing what's known as CRISPR gene editing technology that can be used to change the DNA of animals, plants, and microorganisms. About 3 billion years ago, bacteria evolved a defense mechanism to fight infection by viruses. When they survive a viral attack, they store a part of the virus DNA in their own genetic code in a DNA archive known as clustered, regularly interspersed short palindromic repeats, commonly known as CRISPR. When the virus encounters bacteria again, it quickly makes an RNA copy in its CRISPR archive and passes it to a protein called Cas9. Cas9 scans all genetic material from an attacking virus until it finds a 100% match and binds to that DNA sequence. The protein then acts like a pair of molecular scissors which cut the viral DNA or RNA. This disrupts the function of that gene and therefore the virus's life cycle. The gene editing revolution began when researchers discovered that CRISPR-Cas9 could be programmed in the lab to cut DNA sequences of their choosing, including sequences in animal genomes.
Scientists take cells from the cattle and add the CRISPR-Cas9 protein to them. That protein is bound to custom-designed RNA that targets a specific gene, then uses its molecular razor to cut the DNA that provides space for the genetic editing to take place.
We do things like deleting a single base pair that changes the behavior of a gene, or alternately adding another copy of a native gene in order to get more of that activity. And through those really small changes, they add up to really new behaviors that are actually changing the way we think about scaling cultivated meat.
Those changes have allowed Sci-Fi Foods to achieve what it believes is an industry first, growing beef cells inside a solution contained in a stir tank bioreactor.
As far as we know, that these are the first beef suspension cell lines. Folks working in the cultivated meat space have gotten chicken cells, avian cells, to grow in suspension like this because they recognize that it's a really key way of reducing cost at scale.
It saves cost and space. Beef cells have previously been grown by attaching them to plastic surfaces.
Now imagine a single layer of beef cells attached to a plastic surface. How much square area do you need in order to make a lot of beef cells for a burger? A lot. But now, if you imagine going to a three-dimensional culture, there's lots more beef cells floating around there having access to nutrients.
I mean, what's growing in there could be used in, how many burgers or...
Operating at maximum density, one of these 2-liter bioreactors could probably do a handful of burgers.
And you're not killing an animal, right?
Yes, yeah, we're not. So the original donor animal is still happy and thriving, living in Ohio somewhere on a lovely farm. And so that cow wasn't harmed in the process. And yeah, these cell lines can produce food without harming animals.
Over in the test kitchen, CEO and co-founder Josh March serves up this one-of-a-kind patty.
These burgers are a blend of plant-based ingredients with our cultivated beef cells. And so the beef cells are bringing in a lot of the proteins, the fats that actually create the flavor and experience of meat.
Now, are there a little bit of cells, a lot, or I don't know if you can say the exact amount, but I'm just curious, how many cells?
Yeah, so we don't share the exact percentage, and we're constantly innovating and experimenting. But these products are primarily, it's a majority plant-based, and then a minority of cells.
Finally, it's time for a truly rare bite.
We'll
To
take a
make
look here.
you one of the first people in the world to eat cultivated beef.
One of the first people.
And there's not a lot. I'm not sure exactly how many. Maybe it's sub 100, certainly sub 1,000.
Less than 100 people have had, less
Cultivated beef,
Uh-huh.
I think, in the world.
And less have had yours, right?
Oh yeah, even less have had ours.
We're talking about less than 20 people that have had this?
Probably around that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's really good.
Yeah.
Now, it has a lot of juice on it. Is that from the real meat that you have in there?
Some of it, yeah.
While the plant-based market is predicted to grow to a $79 billion industry by 2028, March believes flavor still holds it back.
It's also clear when you look at the data that there's a lot of people who've tried plant-based meat and plant-based products over the past few years who aren't continuing to buy it regularly. And when you ask them why, the majority of them say that it just doesn't taste good enough. And that's why it's so important to be able to close that gap and create a product that actually tastes amazing and tastes like real beef.
And by creating beef the sci-fi way, March says they are on track to cut down production costs by leaps and bounds.
A big part of our approach was to use our approach of bioengineering to make these tiny changes to the cells so that they were comfortable being grown in these large-scale manufacturing conditions. And to our knowledge, no one else in the world had achieved that with beef, and we achieved that a few months ago. And that's this huge unlock. When you actually do the math of how much it costs to grow cells at scale, that results in a 1,000-fold price decrease compared to just a normal beef cell that you took out an animal. So it's a really amazing milestone for us, but also for the industry in general.
Sci-Fi Foods hopes to have its cultivated beef burgers in restaurants within 2 years.
Do you think someday, we will stop eating animals and we'll just be using cell-based meat, plant-based products?
Eventually, yeah. I don't have any problem at all, if there's with some pasture-raised cows and things like that, right? We're not trying to take that away. The reality in the US is that 96% of beef is factory farmed. No one's a fan of factory farmed beef. So our goal is to replace that. And I do think in 30, 50 years, we're going to be looking back on today, and we're really going to be thinking that it was just insane that we're cutting down the Amazon rainforest to make space for cattle so that we can have burgers. And I love eating burgers, but like, that's not the way to do it.